Welcome to the Candidate Forum hosted by the League of Women Voters of DeKalb County in partnership with WNIJ. My name is Jan Dorner and I'm from the League of Women Voters of Elmhurst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that neither supports nor opposes candidates or parties for any office. The League's focus is to promote political responsibility for the informed and active participation of citizens in government. Providing this forum allows citizens to become better informed about the issues facing their community and to become better acquainted with the candidates running for office. We are happy to provide this service for the community. The League of Women Voters is not responsible for verifying the accuracy of the statements that candidates make in this forum. Questions from the League and community members have been collected before this forum and were screened for duplication, clarity, and appropriateness to the office being discussed. The candidates have not been provided the questions before this forum. We are not taking live questions tonight. The candidates agreed in the ground rules that no voice, image, or other duplication of the forum may be used by any candidate's representative or campaign in any campaign advertising. This forum is available on 2 different WNIJ platforms, including Facebook Live. I've been asked to announce that WNIJ reserves the right to mute comments from persons who do not follow the WNIJ social media policy. This forum is among 2 of the 3 candidates seeking the nomination representing the Republicans for the position of the Illinois State Senator for District 37. Candidate Tim Yeager is unavailable to attend. By participating in this forum, all candidates have agreed to abide by the rules set forth prior to this forum. Each candidate will present a 1-minute introductory statement, the order set alphabetically by last name. Then questions will be asked and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond in alternating order. Closing statements will be 1 minute as well. An electronic timer will be used and candidates will strictly adhere to the time limits. Candidates, when the timer reaches 0, you may finish your sentence, but then you must stop. Our candidates tonight are Lee Arellano Jr. and Chris Bishop. So let's start off with Lee Arellano Jr. Your opening statement, you have 1 minute.
My name is Arellano. I am a Army soldier, veteran. I've been in the Army Engineers over 20 years. I'm a business owner. I worked in the corporate world for a little while. And then at age 26, I started opening my own businesses right here in Dixon, Illinois. I also am past mayor of Dixon. I got inspired to run if being very angry can be called inspired. When we found out that Dixon was home to what is believed to be the largest municipal fraud in U.S. history, that was ran for election in 2015. I served 2 terms as mayor, doing reform work, financial reforms, ethical reform, then got heavily involved in our cities and development. Now, if you come to Dixon, we are proud to say we're the scene of one of the largest municipal turnarounds in U.S. history. We have things getting built. Our property tax rates have been going down for years in a row. We've set records for the amount of street work we're getting done. And we're setting records for the amount of economic activity we've had. And so my next goal is to take some of that knowledge and experience as a business leader, as a military leader, and as a reformist mayor down to Springfield and do some of those same work there.
Thank you. Chris Bishop, your 1 minute opening statement.
Thanks, Jan. I appreciate the introduction and the ability or a chance to speak here to everybody. Chris Bishop, also out of Dixon, Illinois. I'm a father of 2 children. I work for a grain marketing company called Ag Perspective. I'm on my 2nd term on the city council here in Dixon, Illinois. I did spend some time serving with Lee. I was also a coach and a teacher for Dixon Public Schools for over a decade. And I believe in this position, there's 3 things the person that takes the Senate seat needs to be able to do. Number 1, be able to go out to the communities and figure out what the specific issues are in each of those communities. Secondly, you need to figure out where you fall in line with how you can help out with those issues. Are they local? Are they at the state level, or are they federal? And what piece can you play in order to get things done or help folks facilitate the way to get them done? And then the third thing is just creating relationships. You have to have a relationship with people in different part of the district to get that information. And then you need to have relationships, whether it be in Springfield or at the federal level, in order to actually get things done for folks. And I think that's one of the things that I have the ability to do, is actually make those connections, find out those issues, and work to solve problems that our communities have in the 37th.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop, we're going to start with you with your first question. What is your opinion of the Safety Act as amended?
So the Safety Act, one of the things we talk about a lot is just the different constraints it puts on law enforcement. And something I think that we miss sometimes is the financial constraints it's putting on counties. We have counties within this district that are going to lose out on hundreds of thousands of dollars, and not just the bail, but also the processing fees that are going on. So fiscally, it's causing an issue. And then number two, for our judicial system, there's a backlog of cases that are building up. Our state's attorneys don't have enough manpower to keep up with them. It puts a constraint on how much time someone has and before they have to go and see a judge. And it's really throwing things into a loop as far as how we condensed everything down. So much so that the Illinois Supreme Court now has a task force that's looking at this issue on how we can actually streamline some of the things that are going on and make it a little bit more efficient, and ways that we can go back to the legislation itself and maybe make some changes. That report's going to come out on March 1st. One of the things that I would suggest that legislators do is take a look at that report, sit down with our law enforcement, but also our state's attorneys and our judges in the district, and try to figure out how we can make this thing work, maybe as it's intended to.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano, your opinion.
Well, it needs more amendment. I think we're working on our fourth trailer bill here. We still have a lot of problems with it. If you talk to our sheriffs and our law enforcement, it was passed in an unethical manner, quite frankly, in the middle of the night with no time to really read and study. And the results have shown that. So there were some good intentions in there, but in the rush to get it through when they had a chance, they threw a lot of things that just didn't work. So it needs continued amendment. The other thing I'd say is it's clearly, certainly in the beginning and even as amended, it's clearly looking through the lens of what they believe law enforcement needs in the Chicago area for reform. And it really didn't take into account rural or ex-urban voices. And the kind of challenges we face, which are dramatically different than what Chicago faces. So the challenges you'll see in Grand Tour, where I grew up, about 350 people. In Dixon, where I was mayor, about 15,000 people. In Sterling or Rock Falls and Geneseo and Rochelle, they're just not the same. And that bill doesn't take that into account. So we need to continue amendments, and we need some voices from the counties that will be representing the 37th, from the sheriffs, from the law enforcements, as well as those advocates that are seeking reform, to get it to better match our needs. So we need continued amendment to make that work as intended.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano, last year, Illinois passed legislation which protects abortion providers and gender-affirming care providers, as well as out-of-state patients, from the reach of out-of-state investigators and legal actions. Do you support or oppose these actions, and why?
I oppose. I think just about every Republican down there did. And I know at least one, if not more, Democrats opposed it as well. And so what we're seeing in Illinois, because of supermajority rule and one-party rule, is some of the most liberal, one-sided legislation you can come up with. Some of it's been struck down as unconstitutional. SB 1909, which was part of the same stream of bills, not to protect abortion, but to push abortion and to promote it, that got a permanent injunction against it in courts. And with all the pieces of play, only have concealed carry rights in Illinois because a court found Springfield was unconstitutional about our rights. And so in terms of this particular bill, no, I don't support it. I don't think any Republicans do. It's part of a big push to make Illinois have some of the most liberal cases until we brush against what is constitutionally even allowed. And thankfully, the courts have started pushing back that. But in terms of this particular case, like I said, the governor and some of those interests down there are looking to see how far they can push legislation, not to defend abortion rights, but push them to promote. We see them literally put billboard dates inviting people to come here for that. And this bill was part of that endeavor.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop?
Yeah, I also oppose the bill. Lee also hit on Senate Bill 1909, which I can't agree with more. It had an injunction on it, so much so the Attorney General that wrote the legislation even came out basically during the end of the case and said he's not going to prosecute, and realized that it had no standing. It was unconstitutional. So once again,
Right.
with the movement itself, I'm opposed to that.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop, would you support updating Illinois voting statutes to require that ballots be finalized, including legal challenges to candidates, before ballots are printed so that early voting and mail-in ballots are accurate? Please explain why or why not.
So before I go through that, can you walk me through specifically what you want validated before things go out? And we can take up my time too.
I am reading, I believe this came from the community, but I can read you the question again.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Would you support updating Illinois voting statutes to require that ballots be finalized, including legal challenges to candidates, before ballots are printed so that early voting and mail-in ballots are accurate? Please explain why or why not.
So I don't want to go too far because I'm not positive on exactly the detail of the question. But for me, when you're going to the polls, anytime you're going to take a vote, you want to know that the folks that are on that ballot are going to be there on the day of the election. Personally, that's one of the reasons. There's many reasons, but why I vote on the day of the election itself. But we're opening things up. We're giving people more opportunity. So I think having the security of knowing who's going to be on the ballot is a good thing.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano?
Yeah, I mean, I support the concept. The devil, of course, as always, is in the details. I think there's a lot of distrust in the conservative world in terms of what Illinois in particular has done with election integrity. And I think some of that is valid. But the core concept, which is we need a system that is fair, that is accessible, that is functional, and ready to go by the time voters are starting to look who their candidates are going to be and researching them. That core premise is very needed. But again, in terms of the devil in the details, some of the things that have slowed this down have been court cases, and certainly due process needs to be respected. You think to the last election cycle, which was incredibly long because of some of the fights and disagreements over the census and over the remap and over what I believe are unconstitutionally drawn maps in Illinois, where our Supreme Court, or our Constitution, requires compact districts. And we know these aren't. Those kind of details need their due process, and rushing to answer them purely for the sake of appearances, that's a problem. And so anything that would allow things like those unconstitutional maps to go through, that I have a problem with. But the core concept, yes, voters deserve to know who's on the ballot so they can start researching them.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano? In this era of intense partisanship, when elected officials are expected to fall in line with their party's demands, how will you handle an issue where your own ideology and experience differs from your party's expectations?
Yeah, I think this is an important question when you look at what a leader is capable of doing. Because on the one hand, we want ethical people who are going to stand up for the beliefs that they announced when they were running. And certainly one of the knocks on politicians at their worst is that they're going to be two-faced and say whatever they need to get elected. And then once they get in office, they're going to go along to get along. And so we need people who have some integrity, who are going to announce what they're going to do. And then within reason, do it. You need to be open to new information and adjust as needed. So that part's very critical. But going to the other part of that question, which is how do you get along with your own party when you disagree them? The answer is pretty simple. First of all, you got to have conversations one-on-one with people. You got to build relationships. You got to try to understand where they're coming from. So that way, a simple misunderstanding doesn't blow up into a relational fight. And certainly we've seen that at politics at the local, state, and federal level, where personal disagreements or misunderstandings lock people into positions and they get angry. But first of all, you got to stand on what you go for, whether you disagree with your party or you disagree with the other party. And the last part of that is you have to lead. If you think your party is wrong and it's something that's critical to you, you got to stand up, get others to understand why you believe what they do, and try to get them to come over to your side as we move towards a solution. Sometimes leaders have to lead.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop.
I think the important part is one that was already hit is having conversations with folks, very straightforward and honest conversation for the beginning of your service there. And then have your moral compass and your base, and you have to stick to that. And folks have to understand that, and folks respect that. You tell them when, hey, this is something I can't get involved with. I disagree with what's there. And there's respectful ways to do that. And I think anybody with a sound mind that understands that is willing to work with someone that does that. Where it becomes more complicated is when you compromise that time and time again, and then you try to make a stand. But making sure that your stance is clear to everybody around you, and just respectfully let them know that this is something I can't do. If you need to give the reason why, obviously you can stand up on that. Not every detail is going to be in public light. So maybe there's something that folks don't see in the background, but at the same point, an open dialogue with those folks is what's most important. And then standing up for what you believe in.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop, what action will you take as a member of the Illinois State Legislature to ensure the integrity of our elections and the accurate counting of ballots?
I think one of the biggest things we can do is just make sure each county clerk is going through the rolls every year before elections. You're just going through and figuring out who's moved, who hasn't moved, if there's been deaths. You go through those voter rolls, you try to verify people. And if things are in question, that's where we go back and we look at that integrity. We already talked a little bit about before is verifying folks before they get on the ballot. Obviously, we've already talked about, we want to be very specific what that would look like. But really, you set strict rules for this because this is the most important thing that we do as citizens is have a chance to vote. And so I think it's very serious situation in which you need to make sure that your elections have that integrity. I think that starts with voter rolls, going through and verifying the best you can. And if there's complications with that, then those are the things you really need to look at going into an election.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is a huge issue that strikes to the core of how we elect people. If you look back a couple of years, there's a known case where Russia was meddling or trying to meddle and do cyber attacks on our election system, including in Illinois. And so that's a fear. I mean, we see in the news constantly major companies that we know have tons of lawyers and tech specialists have attacks that work and consumer information is released. And so you're going to have a hard time convincing regular folks who are seeing these things in the news constantly that we have some sort of perfect system. We don't, and we have to assume it needs to be protected. And so with that in mind, I support electronic voting, but I think we need to build redundancies into the system. Part of the reason Dixon had that large municipal fraud is there wasn't checks and balances and there wasn't fraud redundancy in the system. And so if you apply that same concept to election integrity, we need to have ways to audit it, whether that's hand count audits afterwards, whether that's paper trails, whether that's looking at something serious like voter ID. Those things are needed. So we need to build fraud protection into it.
Candidate Arellano, what specific measures would you take to make housing more affordable and more available in Illinois?
Oh, that's a great question. That's been a huge issue that I had to deal with as mayor that I think we're dealing with all across the country. And like many major problems, there is a whole host of things that need to be looked at. There's no silver bullet. So, for example, we need to tackle inflationary policies that are driving up the cost of construction materials. We need to look at policies that are making it harder to employ people and worsening a worker shortage, which directly impacts cost. We need to look at the fact that Illinois has the largest tax burden for a middle-class family, including the number 2 highest property taxes in the country, behind only New Jersey, right? And those are all things that factor, because the more you pay in taxes, the less you have to buy anything, and housing is one of the key costs. And the cost of building materials notoriously skyrocketed during this inflationary period. So those are all huge. We need to look at zoning issues. America, sometimes in our zeal to have high quality of life and high protections, goes overboard and makes it hard to put up simpler homes that can be safe but affordable. And we see that as a factor, in San Francisco, which has some of the highest costs. Some of their over-regulation has produced great test studies on what not to do. And so we need to look at that at the municipal level and also at the state statute level, and make it easier, less regulation, less taxes, so people can afford to get into a home.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop.
I think one of the biggest things to do is work with developers, home builders. If you can incentivize certain places in order to get them the ability to do, you make it easier for them to have access to what they need. And that doesn't mean that municipalities or the state just rolls over and gives them whatever they want, but they work with them. They sit down at the table. What is this really going to take for a project? How can we make this beneficial to both? Regulations already were talked about here, but going through different municipal codes and things and sitting down with local contractors, what makes sense, what doesn't, what are we restricting too much, what's driving up the cost of how we can do this, but still thinking about what's the safety part of that and making sure those things are implemented. Jobs are another big thing. We know that there's a lot of them available, but pushing people to get the training they need to get higher paying jobs. A lot of times it could even be trades. We're seeing a lot of that segment of the population that's getting older now and they're going out. And some of these young people, we need to get them in, put those in those jobs that are going to be a little bit higher paying, that they can have a career in the rest of their life. And doing that puts them in a position where hopefully they can afford these homes that we're talking about.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop, would you pursue legislation that would allow small and family-owned farms to operate competitively in a market dominated by large commercial farms? Why or why not? Please be specific.
Well, I think the question gets a little bit vague too, because I don't know exactly what they're saying by small farms. So are they talking commodities? Are they talking animals? And I know you don't have the answer to this. There's an open market for people to go out and compete with each other. Is a farmer that has 200 acres going to keep up with a farmer that has 3,000 acres? I don't think so. I don't have a great answer for that question. I believe there's an open market for a reason, especially if we're talking about grain. There's already a market that's set on the Board of Trade. So depending on what specifically they're talking about, I have a hard time diving into that question completely beyond what I've already said.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano.
There's a few things we can do. Like Chris, I think we need to be careful about what we do in the free market, because if you start taking a bunch of tax money to prop up a certain particular industry or a certain size, well, A, you're driving up costs because we got to tax people to get that, and B, you're stifling the innovation that free market can bring. That being said, like a lot of industries, agriculture has been a victim of the larger companies or entities having advocacy when regulations are passed. I came out of food service. My grandfather had a dairy farm in Wisconsin, which is now not in the family because dairy is almost entirely conglomerates. And one of the things you'll see is when they're passing regulation or statutes at the state and federal level, the big boys, whether it's food industry, restaurants, whether it's ag, they have input, and sometimes they even like some of those because it makes it harder for smaller businesses to succeed. And that's one area where we can make sure there's an even playing field. And as a legislator, we have a duty to make sure we're listening to the small businesses, the family farms, not just the big boys who pay to have the high-priced lobbyists who, oh, by the way, donate to make sure their voices is heard. And I think making sure the free market is actually fair and balanced and not staggering to one side is one of the biggest things we can do.
Thank you. Candidate Arellano. As a state legislator, would you support or oppose efforts to speed the transition from fossil fuels to alternative sources of energy, including in state government buildings, schools, libraries, courthouses, and other public facilities?
Oh man, anytime you talk about speeding a process and transition like that, you're getting in very dangerous territory. And I'll give you an example. There's a lot of Illinois municipalities that have municipal power. Dixon is not one of them, but several in the 37th do, including places like Rock Falls, Rochelle, and a lot of them had invested taxpayer money into plants that now, through state statute and forced action, will not see their full life expectancy. And these are incredibly expensive plants, right? And so what they essentially did is tank the ROI of these municipalities that invested in municipal power. And that has ripple effects. I use that as one example, but that has many mirrors across the industry. And so you're damaging the life expectancy of plants. You're damaging our ability to be energy independent truly because you're trying to stack the deck in favor of one thing or another. I was happy to see Senator Resin was able to do a little more with nuclear power. Hopefully that's a seed for more that can be done in the future. And so kudos to her for getting that across the line. But I would be very leery of putting my foot on the floor to try to speed up a process that has unintended consequences, both for the industry and for the taxpayers, just purely to pursue ideology. I think it's a good goal. And as a soldier, I don't want to go to war over oil, but we need to be careful.
Thank you. Candidate Bishop.
Yeah, I think the move towards green energy, as we kind of are talking about here, it's not a negative thing if it's done the right way. If we're subsidizing green energy just for the sake of it being there, to the point where it's never going to hold itself up, then I don't think we're solving the issue. I think biofuels are a huge thing that could be coming down the line. We're seeing more and more with airlines doing that. We've seen them in cars. They faded off a little bit, but hopefully they come back. One of the other things talked about today was nuclear energy. It's one of the cleanest energies that we have. So allowing Illinois to continue forward with that and hopefully building on that is a positive thing. If solar can be used and the power generated put on the transmission lines appropriately, that's a good thing for us to have. I think there's a lot of details in any project you're looking at, specifically with that or any other green energy. And the devil's in the details. We've already talked about that once tonight. I think each project individually needs to be looked at. Does it make sense? Is it going to sustain itself? And those are the big things. So moving forward, clean energy is good, but it's got to be something that's going to last and not something just for the sake of we're going to push this forward because we think that it needs to happen now.
Thank you. So candidate Chris Bishop, will you please give your closing statement? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, first off, I want to say thank you. Appreciate getting the opportunity to give some of my views out, answer some questions. Really, when you're looking at this race and you're looking at the three candidates, one of the things I always ask myself about candidates that I support, and I hope you do of the ones in this race, is look at the candidate, try to come up with a feel of who cares about your community around you, who's looking into the issues that are there in the 37th district or any district that you're a part of, and who is going to really strive to get done what you feel needs to be done, and how effective are they going to be with working with those folks that are there. And so heading into this primary, I just hope folks take me into consideration, take your time doing your research, reach out if you have any questions. I'm just here to try to bring a little bit of common sense back into Springfield. And if you're interested in that, I would appreciate your vote.
Thank you. Candidate Lee Arellano Jr., your closing statement. 1 minute.
Well, thank you. Well, elections are about the future. They're about what the direction we're going to go. And one of the biggest problems we have in Illinois is the direction we're heading, whether it's people moving out, whether it's the difficulty recruiting employers, especially large employers to Illinois, whether it's talking about having the number 2 highest corruption in the nation, whether it's talking about our incredibly high tax burden. And one of the things I will say is we knew those personally in Dixon. We were tied for our region's highest property taxes. We had obviously some of the highest corruption in the state, in the nation, right before I took office. And so I would hold my track record up against anyone in terms of what Dixon looks like now. So when we are looking at the future, you want to look at, has this candidate been able to produce as the past? You know, I'm the grandson of a Mexican immigrant, and I'm a multi-business owner, and very proud of what I've built. I'm a firm believer in the American dream. I'm also a firm believer that that's something you can grade somebody by, their work ethic and what they've produced. As a mayor, as I mentioned, we've seen phenomenal growth in Dixon, but first we had to reform the city government. And that's what I want to do in Illinois. Before we can change the future in the direction we're headed, whether it's the corruption, whether it's the debt levels, we need the reforms, the ethical reforms and the financial reforms that are the groundwork for economic development and growth and success going forward. So I ask for people's support on March 19th, and I intend to do that.
Thank you. Our time is up for this forum. Your participation as a candidate and as a voter is essential to preserving our freedom and our country. For more information, please visit the nonpartisan website, illinoisvoterguide.org, where the recording of this forum will be posted on each candidate's page. Please remember to vote on or before March 19th. We thank the candidates, the DeKalb League of Women Voters Voter Service Committee, and the WNIJ for organizing this forum. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Have a good night.